Hello and welcome back. My name is Yoder of Coriander Quilts, and today is the last day of our Sunny Patches block of the month. I will be sharing the final block for this whole sew along, and we also have the finishing instructions. So you will want to grab both of those patterns over on my blog. It is corianderquilts.com. That information is linked down in the description box, so you can print those out or view those on your tablet or however you have been using those as we go throughout the months. I said Sunny Ohio Star, and this is what the block will look like. I have my beautiful day blocks already sewn together, so at the end of this video I'm going to show you what your quilt will look like completed. The nice thing about this sew along is that there's no sashing, there's no borders, unless you want to add some, of course you could. So that means that if you have kept up with all of your blocks every month and you have all of your jelly roll blocks done, those were the blocks we made the very first month, you can just sew everything together after you complete this month's block. So it does finish very quickly once we get to this point. Now let me show you what we've made so far. If you are caught up, you have made all of these blocks. These are Sunwashed fabrics I've been using for my blocks, and these are the blocks that have been released in the previous months. These patterns are all still available on my website, so if you're just now finding this sew along, you are welcome to join in at any time. And if you're not quite caught up, you can go print those patterns out whenever you would like to. And then we have a bunch of these jelly roll blocks. So these are just scrappy and fun using your jelly roll. And that's what we have so far. As I said, today we are making this little cutie right here, the Sunny Ohio Star block. These are beautiful day fabrics, and this one is going to be fun for me to share with you because it is a very festive quilt. I knew I was going to be finishing this one up close to the holidays, and so I was excited to have one with Christmassy fabrics. There's a little bit of pink in there, but I stuck with mostly the reds and the greens from Beautiful Day, so it is a really nice festive quilt, and you'll get to see that just a little bit later. Let me move these blocks out of the way, move my pattern over. So this is the pattern for this month. I have all of my pieces cut out here, so you will want to go ahead and cut those out, especially if you're following along with this video tutorial so that you can just follow step by step as we move our way through the pattern. Everything is cut out and labeled, just like you see on the first page here. As with the previous months, there is a simplified version if you would prefer not to piece that little center Ohio star. And let's just dive in. We're going to start with that center. So if you are opting for the simplified version, you would be following the starred steps in this beginning portion to skip that center. But if you are making your little block just like mine, you'll just follow along right with me. We are going to pull the B squares and the D squares. We're going to be first making these into half square triangles, which you can see in this step right here. And I have marked my diagonals, my sewing diagonals already. There are a couple different ways that we can go about making half square triangles. So if you have a different method you prefer to use, you just go ahead and use that method. I always think when we're making quilt blocks and quilts, we should do whatever methods work best for us. So I did mark mine. I am going to be using my June Tailor ruler. If you have been around here for any length of time, you know that I use this ruler quite a bit, and today is no exception. So I used this ruler to mark my sewing lines using this portion of the ruler, and I will link this down below in that description box. If this is a ruler that looks handy to you, you have the information for it. But when you're marking these, you will just put your blue line right across from corner to corner, and then there are these little slits on either side that you just put your pencil right down in there and mark your sewing lines. So I have those marked. These get sewn together with your B squares, which one of my B squares got away from me, so I'm going to need to locate where my other B square is. But you're going to place these together and then sew on those diagonals. Those are 1/4 inch away from the center line, so I will sew on those. I'm going to be making a pair of these once I find my other square that I'm missing. Sew on those, cut apart, and then we will go to our next step. Now these are going to start out just like half square triangles, except we're not going to do any trimming at this point. I'm going to do just this first step and then meet you right back here. I cut myself up a new B-square. I am sure that as soon as we are done recording this video, that B-square is going to pop up right when we no longer need it. But in the meantime, I just cut myself a new one. I've got my half square triangles made here. We have 4 total, and that is this step right here. And these are pressed towards that darker fabric. I also marked more diagonal lines according to the instructions in step 2 on the back of 2 of those half square triangles. I just used this same ruler and drew my sewing lines. Those lines are 1/4 inch away from the diagonal. And we are going to take 2 together, right sides together. This is how they get put, just like so. And then we are going to sew again on those 2 marked lines. And I'm going to do that for both of these pairs. Sew on those marked lines and then cut across the diagonal. This is what your units are going to look like right now. They have not been trimmed. They are pressed to one side. And I have trimmed 2 of them, so you can see what we are aiming for, just these cute little 1/4 square triangles. FYI, sometimes you will hear 1/4 square triangles also referred to as hourglass units. So if you hear an hourglass unit or a 1/4 square triangle, those would be referring to this same unit right here. We need to trim these 2 yet. They are getting trimmed to 1.5 inches square, so just teeny. And I saved those 2 so that I could show you how to trim those. As I said, I am using my Tailor ruler, which I use all the time for 1/4 square triangles. In my opinion, and with my experiences, I have not found a ruler that I like better for trimming these units, so I use it whenever I can. I think it's nice to know that information, but I don't think it's imperative that you use this ruler. Quilters use all different sorts of rulers for trimming, and you might have one that you like using better. So that's great. I just always like to give you the information so that you have it. If you are using a different ruler, you may need to know your center point, which is 3/4 inch. That means that this little center, where these 2 units meet, where everything meets right there in the center, it's 3/4 inches from there to the edge on all 4 sides. So you will want to keep that in mind if you're using a different ruler, that you would need to measure that distance so that you can keep these units nice and centered. This ruler kind of does all of that for me, so I don't need to worry about that measurement. What I will do is, it has all of the diagonals marked, so I am just lining everything up with my 1/4 square triangle, the center point there, and then all of my diagonals. And then there are grooves on either side, on the left and right side, so I can put my rotary cutter right down in there, trim both sides, pivot my unit around, and then do the same on the remaining 2 sides. It just makes these so nice. That one's done, and then we'll do this last one yet. We're going to be making another set of 4 1/4 square triangles for this block, but in a larger size. So this ruler is going to be getting its use on this block. And I love Ohio stars, so I use it quite a bit. Do you guys have a favorite quilt block that you like to make? I just love an Ohio star. That means 1/4 square triangles get made often around here. Okay, we've got all 4 of those made. And now we are going to lay that out so that we can sew it together. So we are already down here onto step 4. So we're going to be using those 4 units. We need our E squares, and we also need our center A square. And then we're just going to lay everything out and sew everything together. So these are just going to go like this. I always manage to make it look nice and crooked on screen for you guys. Let's straighten that up a little bit. Get it all lined back up. And this is how this block is going to get laid out. And then we're just going to sew everything together in our horizontal rows. Your pressing instructions are right here in this illustration. So your top row will get pressed towards these squares, as well as your bottom row, and your center row gets pressed towards that center square. And then after you have sewn the horizontal rows together, you are going to press those seams away from the center. Let me sew this together, and actually I'm going to do my next step at the same time while I'm at the sewing machine. I mentioned that we need to make another set of larger quarter square triangles. I'm just going to grab the pieces that I need for that and sew those up at the same time. The next size is going to be much bigger. If you didn't like these little pieces, you're going to like these larger ones a little bit better. You're going to need your C squares and your F squares. And you are going to sew these exactly the same way that I just showed you, but on a larger scale. I have marked the back of my background squares. Those get paired up with the darker print, and you're going to be sewing on those marked sewing lines. And you're going to make 4 pairs. Now, if you look at your pattern here, this is going to be step 5. Again, we're starting out just like we would for half square triangles, but we do not need to trim those. And then you're going to mark 2 of those half square triangles once you have those sewn up, and then put those together just like we did a couple minutes ago and make our quarter square triangle units. These are going to get trimmed to 3.5 inches square with the center point at 1 3/4. I'm going to go ahead and do all of those steps at the same time. Sew my center square and then also make these 4 quarter square triangle units and meet you back here. After you have assembled your 4 quarter square triangles and assembled your center Ohio star block, you're ready to put together this larger block section. You're going to use those units that I just mentioned, plus your 4 G squares laid out just like I have them here. This is step 8 in your pattern. These are going to get sewn together in horizontal rows. You're going to press towards G in the top and bottom rows, and you'll press towards the center in that center row. Once you have sewn those together, then your last 2 seams will get pressed away from the center. So you'll press away from the center. And then the last thing that you'll need to do is to sew your borders on. I'm going to sew this center portion together, followed by the borders. So you will sew H to the sides. These are your H rectangles, and then your I rectangles to the top and bottom. And all of those will get pressed away from the center. I'm going to finish this block up, and then we are going to take a look at that beautiful day quilt finished that I promised we were going to see at the beginning of this video. And here is what your completed Sunny Ohio star block will look like. Now remember, this is a 12-inch block at this point in time. It is going to finish at 11.5 inches within your quilt. And then behind me, we have the beautiful day version sewn up and complete. It's not quilted yet. I did just sew all of the blocks together last week, so I haven't had a chance to get it quilted, but it will soon be on its way to the quilter. So I will have a fun Christmas festive feeling quilt just in time for the holidays. Now, the layout for this quilt is available over on my blog, as I mentioned. This is what it's going to look like in the Sunwashed version. And those are the finishing instructions. So do make sure that you print one of those out, a copy of those finishing instructions, along with your quilt block pattern when you head over to the blog. Again, all of that information is linked down below in the description box. If you have any questions about anything I shared today, feel free to leave me a question down below as well, and I will do my very best to answer that for you. Thank you so much for stopping by. I hope you thoroughly have enjoyed this sew along, and I hope you enjoy finishing up your quilt. I'll catch you again next time.